What is going on, guys? McSkillets here, and today I have another CSGO video. This video is going to be on the hardest skins to trade for CSGO, and I'm not trying to make some sort of new rules here. These are just based on my experiences and stuff I've noticed when I've been trading and looking at other trades and people trying to sell items, basically. And there's some items that are just really hard to sell. And I've seen people try to sell these items for months and not get any offers close to what they're going for. I've tried to sell some of these items myself, and it was kind of a mistake. But I wouldn't discourage you guys to buy any of these skins if you actually like them just for the looks or want to keep them. But just keep in mind, if you want to buy any of the skins in this video, all of these types of skins are very hard if you plan on reselling them. So if you plan on trying to just trade and make profit, you might want to avoid these items unless you plan on waiting for a bit. So let's get right into the first type of item. So starting off, we have StatTrak knives that aren't factory new mainly. Some StatTrak knives, even if they are factory new, for like Karambit Fade, it has kind of a shitty floating pattern. Those can sometimes be kind of hard to trade anyway, but mainly the ones that are the hardest to trade are StatTrak knives that are like field tested, well worn, battle scarred, sometimes minimal wear. A lot of these StatTrak knives that aren't in very good condition are super hard to trade because a lot of people would just prefer to get a non-StatTrak version of the same knife, which they can usually get for cheaper and better condition. So they have to make kind of a bad sacrifice if they want to get a StatTrak knife, because a lot of them are more expensive than the same knife in a better condition, because StatTrak knives are 10 times rarer than normal knives, even though a lot of times it's probably not entirely worth it to go for the StatTrak one unless you really just like that StatTrak counter on your knife and on the Karambit. It's only on the back side, of course, anyway. But either way, a lot of people have tough times trying to trade their StatTrak knives. For some StatTrak factory new items, a lot of those are like nice collector's items. You can usually find a collector for those without too much trouble, but when it comes to just about any knife pattern, they are very hard to trade in field tested, well worn, minimal wear, battle scarred, pretty much those conditions if they are StatTrak. Alright, so the next type of items are like mid-tier case hardened blue gems. I'm not talking about the fully blue gem ones, and I'm not talking about the ones that are clearly worth market price. I'm talking about these patterns that are kind of in the middle, and a lot of these pattern based items are just super hard to figure out the prices for and then find a buyer. Because when people are buying case hardened skins, they usually want one that's completely blue or one that is just market price to, like, I don't know, bet with or something like that. But these mid-tier patterns, especially ones that don't have any, for like a Karambit and all the knives pretty much, if they don't have blue on the tip, that's also kind of a problem. The worst place to have the blue is just in the middle without touching any of the sides, because I don't think people like those types of patterns too much. Some people try to trade these patterns called dragon claws, where it's kind of like it stretches from the tip, then gets kind of close to the handle, but it doesn't go all the way. And a lot of them aren't really that blue in general, but it's got blue in kind of a cool spot, and those aren't as hard to trade as these like mid-tier patterns that have blue just in the middle. So if you plan on reselling these types of items after you buy them, I would not recommend buying them in the first place, because it's going to be a massive hassle for you. Also, buying case hardened battle scarred stuff is usually not the best idea, because most people don't want to go to the battle scarred condition when they want like case hardened gems, because one, these skins are battle scarred, they start to get all these little black splotches on them, and usually well worn, field tested, any condition above that's usually pretty fine, won't impact it too much. But to sum things up, if you're buying case hardened stuff, you should kind of try to stay away from the battle scarred condition and these like mid-tier blue gem patterns if you plan on reselling your items. Now, another type of item that's kind of hard to trade is if you have some sort of really rare skin on a weapon that not too many people use. For instance, the StatTrak minimal wear G3SG1 Executioner. I haven't really seen anyone that's looking to buy these. I actually have two of them right now, and I was trying to sell one. I saw one sold on the market for $300, one sold for like $350. So if you get lucky, you can get someone to buy one off the market, but you kind of have to get lucky. It doesn't seem to always happen. You can't just like put it up on the market and it'll sell instantly. But any type of really rare skin that is not on a common weapon, for instance, if you have some sort of rare souvenir dualies, those are going to be very hard to trade, because it seems like not too many people want to buy rare items that aren't on the primary weapons that people use, so it might take a while. You can usually get the full price if you wait long enough on these types of items though, but not always that easy. Next up, we've got StatTrak well-worn skins. For a lot of skins for CSGO, they just barely ever come in the well-worn stat track condition, and it ends up being a lot rarer than field tested a lot of the time. So here's an example here, the StatTrak M4A4, the Battlestar. The well-worn one is actually more expensive on the Steam market than the field tested, but it sells way less often. So for a lot of these covert rifles and kind of more expensive StatTrak items, you kind of want to try to stay away from the well-worn condition. You can probably get field tested for around the same price range, and it'll be a lot easier to sell them, especially if it's StatTrak. So try to stay away from StatTrak well-worn rifles if you want to try to resell your item. That's unless you see a really good deal on one that's way cheaper than field tested. It may be worth it though. And you also have to watch out for this on souvenir skins. Like, I just feel bad for anyone that unboxes a souvenir P2000 Amber Fade well-worn, even though that's actually it's an insanely lucky unbox to get a souvenir P2000 Amber Fade from one of the Dust 2 packages. But if you get it in well-worn condition, it is such a rare item. There's only a couple of them that even exist, but basically no one is looking to buy one of these. I don't really know why you would go for a well-worn souvenir skin, and it's obviously jacked up on the market, of course, because of the rarity. So again, a lot of souvenir skins in the well-worn condition, especially for some of the rarer ones, are really hard to trade. Also, like, just souvenir skins that aren't in minimal wear and factory new can a lot of times be pretty hard to get rid of. It depends on the skin, but this skin is actually specifically rare to get well-worn, and a lot of skins just hard to trade when they're battle-scarred or well-worn souvenir skins. Another type of item that I would not advise getting unless you plan on buying it as a play skin are any type of Doppler minimal wear knives. If someone sends you a trade with a minimal wear Doppler knife and you just want to get that item then sell it, it's not going to be that easy. Lots of people do not want minimal wear Doppler knives, especially on Sapphires and Rubies. Sapphire and Ruby minimal wear Doppler knives are super hard to get rid of unless you really jack the price down. And there's nothing wrong with buying those if you just want a nice play skin, but they're just kind of hard to trade because there's not very many of them, and a lot of times you can find the factory new ones for around the same price, if not cheaper. So I guess it does just end up making them cheaper, but I've seen a lot of people having trouble because people just don't want to go near these minimal wear Doppler knives for some reason. I guess a lot of them do look pretty beat up compared to the factory new ones, but so I wouldn't completely advise buying a minimal wear Doppler knife if you plan on reselling it. So this next category of items are also very hard to trade, and these are skins that are fade knives that do not have a very good fade percentage on them. And here's an example right here, the StatTrak M9 Bayonet Fade. As you can see, there's so much gray on it. There's actually some worse patterns, but this is definitely one of the worst ones. And it also has a pretty terrible float for a StatTrak factory new knife. So it's going to be really hard to get rid of a knife like this. You're probably going to have to quick sell it, or hope that some gambling site overvalues your item. For a lot of the cancerous, really hard to trade items in this video, besides like the pattern based ones, sometimes you can get lucky and you can find some sort of gambling site that'll value it at a lot, and that might actually be worth it. I'm not sure if I would always recommend trying to do that though. I know CSGO Double has some problems valuing items sometimes, especially for some StatTrak knives. But either way, items like this, I don't really see a point in trying to buy this as a play skin, because as you can see, the fade percentage is so bad, and especially for StatTrak, it's probably a much worse problem for StatTrak. For normal ones, for fade knives that aren't StatTrak, it's probably not as hard to trade one that has a bad fade percentage, but for a StatTrak fade knife with a bad fade percentage, going to be very hard to find a buyer for that, because not the most desirable knife to have in game. And this is definitely most evident on the Bayonet and the M9 Bayonet, because if you don't have a good fade on these knives, you will have so much of the gray color on it, and it's just not really that nice to look at, especially if it has kind of a bad float as well. Now, to sum everything up in this video, the ultimate, most cancerous item, the most difficult item to trade ever, would be a StatTrak gut knife, case hardened, well worn, with a very little but somewhat blue pattern. This is pretty much the worst type of item you could ever get for CSGO. Maybe battle scarred, like a super battle scarred version of something like this would be even worse, but well worn, probably the rarest case hardened condition. For the StatTrak ones are just barely ever StatTrak well worn case hardened skins. And here's just an example of a skin that would probably be the most difficult item to get rid of. I don't know why anyone would ever buy a skin like this, unless it's overvalued on some gambling site. I don't know how it would really get overvalued, but otherwise there's no real point in buying this type of skin for a play skin. It will be very hard to get rid of these skins, and it would suck if you happen to have one of these and you're trying to trade it. But if you do like these knives, I'm not going to stop you from buying it. Just you're going to have a tough time trying to trade it for anything more than market price, and it's kind of hard to determine the market price for a StatTrak well-worn knife. But that pretty much sums up this video, guys. Hope you guys found it helpful, and I'm McSkillet, and I'm out.